Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you're right on the edge of a huge legal decision, one that could really shake up a whole country's politics. That's pretty much where we are today as we take a deep dive into the latest developments involving former South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol. We've taken a close look at recent reports, specifically focusing on excerpts discussing a potential rearrest decision that's looming for him. Our mission here is really to pull out the most important bits of information and insight from these reports. We're going to get you up to speed on the main allegations, the court process happening now, and, what it all might mean.
Yeah, and what's really fascinating, I think, is how just one legal case like this can highlight these bigger questions about accountability, about the rule of law itself. Will help you understand not just what's happening, but why it's significant. We'll connect those dots so you can walk away feeling genuinely well-informed.
All right, so let's dive right into the heart of it. What's the main event our sources are zeroing in on regarding former President Yoon right now?
The central thing happening is a pre-arrest interrogation. You might hear it called a detention hearing or maybe a warrant review that's underway for the former president.
Okay, a warrant review. And where's this taking place?
It's happening at the Seoul Central District Court.
Got it.
And the timing is pretty specific. The hearing is scheduled for 2:15 p.m. on July 9th. Judge Nam Si-jin is presiding. He's the judge who handles warrants there.
And when might we know the outcome?
Well, the decision on whether the warrant actually gets issued, that's expected either late on July 9th, so Tuesday night, or maybe early on July 10th, Wednesday morning. These things can take a few hours.
Right. And is Yoon expected to be there himself?
Yes, he's slated to appear in court. But the report suggests he's not actually expected to argue his case directly during this particular hearing. It's more procedural at this stage for him.
Okay, procedural. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. What exactly are the accusations? What's led to this very high-stakes hearing?
Well, the charges are serious. They've been filed by the special prosecutor team, which is led by Cho Eun-sik. The main charges are special obstruction of justice and also fabrication of false official documents.
Special obstruction of justice.
Right.
Can you break that down a bit? What makes it special?
Good question. So special usually implies it's linked to someone misusing the power of a high office, like the presidency. It carries potentially more weight than a standard obstruction charge.
Okay, that makes sense. And the fabrication of false official documents.
That's about creating or changing government records, basically, to mislead people or maybe cover something up. Specifically, the allegations are that he obstructed an arrest warrant that was issued by the CIOHO, that's the Corruption Investigation Office for high-ranking officials, back in January.
Ah, the CIOO warrant.
Exactly. And maybe even more significantly, he's accused of ordering the deletion of encrypted phone call records. These records were apparently related to people involved in the emergency martial law situation.
Right, and just to remind everyone listening that mention of emergency martial law is, well, it's a very sensitive topic in South Korea, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It refers to a really controversial period, where the government invoked extraordinary powers, had a huge impact on civil liberties, the whole political scene back then. So any suggestion of tampering with records connected to that, it makes these charges seem particularly serious. It touches on transparency and accountability around a really difficult part of their history.
So with charges carrying that kind of weight, it sounds like the special prosecutor's really pushing hard here. Why are they seeking rearrest specifically? What's their justification, according to the sources we looked at?
They've laid out several grounds pretty clearly. They're citing a risk that he might commit further offenses,
Okay.
also a flight risk, and the possibility that he might try to destroy evidence. Standard reasons, perhaps, but given the context.
Right. Standard, but maybe amplified here.
Exactly. And beyond those procedural risks, they're really stressing just the sheer seriousness of the alleged crimes themselves. There's a quote from the special prosecutor in our sources that really stands out. They called his alleged actions an incomprehensible act unless one denies the South Korean judicial system and the rule of law.
Wow, that's strong wording.
It is. And they also specifically mentioned concern that, quote, there's a concern that he may flee by disobeying the judgment.
Denying the South Korean judicial system. What does that kind of language signal to you? It feels like it goes beyond just the specific legal points.
It really does. It suggests the prosecution sees these alleged actions not just as, breaking specific laws, but as something that fundamentally challenges the integrity of the country's legal institutions. And considering South Korea's history, where other former leaders have faced legal issues, framing it this way really underlines a deep concern about democratic processes and whether the public can trust the justice system. It makes the case seem bigger than just one person.
Definitely feels that way. But of course, there's always another side to the story. What's former President Yoon's defense team saying? How are they pushing back against these accusations?
So Yoon's defense team has their counter-arguments ready. A key point they're making is that in their view, the special prosecutor hasn't actually presented objective evidence.
Objective evidence, meaning?
Meaning they're suggesting the case relies too heavily on statements from other people involved, rather than, say, hard documents or recordings that directly prove the crime. They assert that the crime itself would be difficult to establish if it's based only on what other people are saying.
So they're questioning the type of evidence being used.
Precisely. In these big, high-profile cases, especially when you're talking about things like alleged verbal orders or obstruction, direct physical evidence, a smoking gun, can be hard to come by. So the defense is likely focusing on the credibility of witnesses and arguing that testimony alone isn't enough for proof beyond a reasonable doubt. They want something more concrete, more objective.
Okay, that makes sense as a defense strategy. So let's talk about the immediate stakes. What happens if this warrant is issued? What are the consequences for Yoon?
Well, procedurally, if the judge approves the warrant, the impact is immediate. Yoon would be taken into custody and held at the Seoul Detention Center while awaiting that formal decision. And if the warrant is ultimately granted after that review, yes, he would be re-imprisoned. He'd be back in custody.
And that would be pretty soon after his last release, right?
Yes, very soon. It would mark his return to detention only about 4 months after he was previously released. Just for context, he was first arrested back on January 19th. Then his detention was canceled, and he was released on March 7th. So this would be a significant turnaround.
A very quick reversal.
Yeah.
And zooming out again, connecting this to the bigger picture, it really does feel like more than just one person's legal troubles, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, this isn't just about Yoon Suk-yeol as an individual. It throws a really bright spotlight on South Korea's ongoing efforts, and maybe struggles, with holding high-level figures accountable through the legal system. It definitely raises big questions about how these kinds of proceedings affect the public's view of justice, institutional stability. Especially given, as we mentioned, the pattern of former South Korean presidents facing legal battles after leaving office, it makes you wonder about the system itself.
It's a powerful reminder that these cases echo far beyond just the courtroom walls. Okay, so to recap for everyone listening, you should now have a much clearer picture of this really high-stakes legal situation involving former President Yoon Suk-yeol. We've covered the specific charges from the special prosecutor, the defense's counter-arguments focusing on evidence, and what could happen immediately depending on this upcoming warrant decision.
And this whole situation, it really prompts a question, I think, for you to think about. We live in a world just flooded with information, right? So how crucial is it for judicial systems, especially when they're dealing with public figures in these really politically charged cases, to maintain transparency and stick firmly to the rule of law, even when it's difficult or divisive?
Yeah, definitely some food for thought there as we wrap up this deep dive. We really hope this has given you the kind of clear, actionable knowledge that helps you stay incredibly well-informed without, feeling totally overwhelmed by it all.
Yeah.